Hello, welcome to the December 9th, 2025 Club Cubase livestream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the livestream today. If you have not attended a livestream before, how it works is you could just simply ask questions in the live chat or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, it's always helpful if you could indicate which version of Cubase that you're running. So if you're running Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, or other Steinberg programs, which version number, so if it's 13, 14, or 15. Also, if you could indicate which operating system you're on, that would also be helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer the questions in a real-time manner may soon be eclipsed with the number of questions that come up. But we will go through all the questions chronologically as asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. We should have an index of all the topics that are covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. And if you want to search for topics been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com and do a search there. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. They're not Steinberg employees. They really do this out of the goodness of their hearts to make it a better community experience, and we appreciate their efforts. We'll also give an extra special round of gratitude for the work that Jazz Dude does for the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord. That's a wonderful user site full of different tutorials, links, downloads that are really beneficial for the Steinberg community. So once again, I'm on, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm based in the United States. And I'm presenting from just outside of Washington, D.C. in Alexandria. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself. And with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so you see the first question from several hours ago. As I asked Greg about the possibility of having a master tune setting for Cubase, he said you could retune everything track by track. I know that. That is why I'm asking for one master tune switch. Well, it's not what I said in our correspondence, I think, that we had on some of the comments in the previous live stream. So if what you had mentioned in your comments were that you couldn't record audio and everything was out of tune when you're tuning your A to 432 as opposed to 440. And I mentioned that you can tune, the audio will capture whatever tuning that you have. The one thing is that if you are doing very audio, if you tune to a full, if your tuning scale is set to 432, and we go into very audio, so when we look at very audio here, and as we adjust, if we adjust our tuning value up perfectly, this would be based on kind of like when we do our pitch quantize, that would be based on 440 hertz. So my point to you, and maybe I'm not sure if you understood, it doesn't seem like you're understanding from the comments, is that if you tune a particular element within very audio and you want it to be, and your tuning scale is set to 432 as opposed to 440, which is kind of standard, but everyone could have their own tuning scales. So if I come over here, that we could just take that particular phrase and just adjust our fine tuning down -8. You don't have to tune every track, just tracks that are involved with very audio or sections that are involved in very audio in case you can't get the tuning. So you could also just have kind of a free adjustment. So if you come over here within the very audio editor, so we'll come over here and So if you want it to just hold down the shift key, you can just do your tuning directly here as well. So you do have fine tuning. So, but as you had indicated in your comments that all of your tracks would be out of tune because like that Cubase is based on 440 hertz. The only thing, Cubase will capture whatever frequencies you record into it. But as you're working with it, you know, and if you need to use Vari Audio for tuning, at that point, I would just simply take that little section of audio, even if you just come right over here, take just that one section that you need to do Vari Audio tuning. If you need to just take that section and move it up, and right now that's tuned at a 440 scale, that you could just go to your fine tune and adjust that down to -8. And that way, as you do your tuning at 440, it's actually playing back at 432. But probably if you have like really good ears and you hear the difference and it's important for you to tune to 432, I would assume that your intonation is really finely tuned in as well. All right. Great to see Jan from Stockholm on. We have is it Klaus Olsson from Malmö, Sweden. Thanks for joining. I have my good friend Per Larson, used to work at Steinberg with me, former colleague. He's from Malmö. Always wanted to go. We see Uno Memento joining from Finland. All right, we have Vince joining from Winnipeg. Thanks, great to see you on. All right, we have VS Terra Nova joining from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. All right, always great to see Jazz Dude on. All right, Rick Francis wishing everyone a happy Friday. You know, I think today is Tuesday. He's just ready for the weekend, apparently. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have P-Script 3259 just saying hi, Greg. Running Cubase 12. All right, wonderful to see Jason Sykes joining from South Yorkshire, England. All right, Don P just says, I'm on Cubase 14 Pro on Windows. How do I tune the 808 for hip-hop and use softly clipper appropriate to bring in the transients? Thank you. So let's just come over. So let's say if we want to come over, so if, you know, I'm not sure where your 808 source is, but if we're going to use something kind of along the lines of the drum machine, you know, if we come over here, so let's just add a drum track. All right. I will just select this particular sound. All right. So now at this point, if we say, okay, I just want to adjust my decay, and let's adjust our tuning. So you could, and you could see the pitch indicated right here. So we're at A0, but let's come over, and if I want to go to B, C, up an octave, down an octave. So as we adjust that, we could actually see the pitch indicated directly there. So we can say, okay, let's move it to be exactly at A0. Now, if you wanted to add, so like a clipper appropriate to bring in the transients. So let's say if I want to, I could add just kind of my click right here. We could adjust the color. So if you don't want a click, and then you could also adjust, you know, if you wanted to adjust or add more punch. And then we could also just, again, come over here if you want to add distortion on it. So that way you could just tune it to a particular pitch and use kind of built-in tools. There's also going to be, if you want it to come over here, let's say, okay, there's going to be pad effects. So if you wanted to, again, come over here, let's say, okay, I want to take this, and if we want to run it through like a bit crusher or distortion, and this is on each individual pad, filters, and an EQ. So very easy to kind of dial in kind of an 808 kick sound, just using entirely, just one instance of Pad Shop or one instance of the drum machine, just kind of starting off. So let me know if that's kind of what you wanted to see. But it's a great way of using kind of 808s for hip hop stuff. All right, we see Razel Zamini checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Stefan joining from Sweden. Jason Sykes says, thank you to all involved in making this a great place to be. It's always great when we have great attendees as well. All right, so Benny checking in from Sweden. And Benny had sent, I believe it was last time, I believe email came from Benny. Was it the template, if I'm not mistaken? So I just took a look. So we open this up, and I don't have the east-west instrument on this particular instance. So this is about the template that wasn't making any sound. So if we are, so I don't have that particular instance, but what I would do is just see if when you open up the particular instrument, so let's say if I'm starting with a new instrument, so I'll just add, and I'll just do a quick Halian Sonic. All right, so say, okay, so what I would do just to see if it's going to be, perhaps just, if you're running into issues, and I believe the issue was that it wasn't sounding. So let's say if we have this particular instrument, see if it's a MIDI communication problem. So there's probably going to be like a software keyboard, see if that keyboard sounds. Like here, if I route this particular instance, I see that we have lots of different groups. So I'm going to take this Halian Sonic, the audio output, and we're going to send this to one of the groups and see if that still sounds. So, it seems like the audio routing is okay, but make sure, that if you just, add another instance of the instrument that's not being routed, but even this is going through the groups, and make sure that the particular instrument is loaded, because we have a lot of instruments. These instruments are going often to different groups. So when we look at our particular channel, let's say for this channel, and we look at kind of the full channel view, so we'll come over here, we can see that this particular instrument is the instrument that's being routed to this group into that particular output. But it seems like when I'm routing other instruments to that, it works. So see if the instrument is actually working by, triggering. See if you see meters going on. So if you see meters going on, that means that you have like audio. That means that you have kind of audio communication going on. but check those particular things and see if you just add a new instance of Opus, which I think is the player for the East-West instruments, and it's not routed through the group, and see if you hear that. But it seems like, everything is kind of working as expected, but sometimes just depending on, configurations in a group, and make sure, if you could let us know if all the particular instruments are running too. Okay, Observation Audio asks, says, "Hi Greg, I'm adding a live album and I need to cut parts to make additional track for different effects. My question is, how can I lock the horizontal movement only without locking the whole clip?" Okay, so let's say if we have, all right, so I think this might be with like a constrained delay, like a kind of not constrained delay, but maybe like a movement. So let's say if I have this particular event here and I want to move it to a different track, but we said we want to lock horizontally. I'm just going to reread this. Okay, so what I would do is, let's say if we need to move part of this track down, so let's just grab this, and I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option key, and it really depends on the first direction that you move events. So as I come over here, I'll make this larger so it's easier to see. Okay, so when I want to like move an event or part of an event, if I want to copy, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key, and I'm going to move it kind of horizontal. I'm going to move it vertically first. So now that I've moved it vertically, I'm going to hold down my Alt or Option. So now I'm making a copy, and then what I want to do is hold down the Control or Command key, and that will lock that event in. Now I can't move it horizontally. So now, if I'm here and I want to move this event, and let's say I accidentally moved it and I'm making a copy just by holding down the Alt key or Option key. All right, but if I wanted to maintain the same exact position in time, I'm holding down my Alt or Option key, and because I moved it vertically first, now that will restrain the direction horizontally. So now I can't move it horizontally. I release the Control or Command key. I can place it anywhere. I hold down the Control or Command key. Now if I do this and I move it first on the horizontal plane, and now I make a copy, I can move it to any track, but if I hold down the Control or Command key, now I can't move it up or down, so it's restricted from moving vertically. So again, I think what you want to do in your scenario is just take this particular track, move it before letting go of the mouse button, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then the Control or Command key, and that will automatically restrain it so that I can't move it in time. All right. Hang on just one second. I have something playing in the background here. All right, let me just turn the volume down on this.
From the Peppers, about an hour after the contest.
All right, sorry about that. Okay. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. Observation audio. All right, so we see Fly V says he's one live stream behind. I have to watch some of it after this today. Thanks for being such a loyal attendee. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden on. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see pscript 3259 says if you take a professionally mastered WAV file and open it in Cubase to make a change, like add a fade out, are there any special considerations to save it as a WAV and maintain the mastered solution? All right, so yeah, there's nothing really to be concerned about. So it could depend on, you probably don't want to, when you export the change, so let's say we'll create empty. All right, so let's say we have this particular file. All right, and let's say as we're listening to it, so let's say this is our mastered file. And let's say we just want to do kind of a fade in, fade out. So look, like this, I think it's going to be a 16-bit 44.1 file. So what you want to do is just, so let's say, okay, I want to come here and just do a fade out. So now you can just say, so our fade out is going to start right about now. So you could just simply do that, and just make sure that once you have that particular change, so that change is done in the DAW, but if you wanted to include that in the particular file, you could export the file, you could freeze in place, or you could just come right over here and just say, okay, I want to just come over here. Let's get to the audio menu, and you could say bounce selection, and now that has been applied directly into the file. But you just make sure that if you have a 32-bit 96K file, try to keep it at the same resolution or higher, instead of, okay, I have a 32-bit 192 kilohertz file that sounds amazing, and I do a fade out and then I export it as an MP3, which could degrade the sound quality. So all right, so we see from Sue, just says, morning Greg, Mac Mini 4 Cubase 15 Pro, is there a voice tuner? Can't find it. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways to do this. Let me just show you a couple of different methods. All right. All right, so if you want it like a real-time plug-in, one of the things that you could do is just come over here. And you'll have pitch correct plug-in. So if you know what the key of the song is, you could set the particular scale of it. So if you want this to do kind of like a very processed tuning sound, we could adjust kind of the speed and the tolerance way up. Or if you want it to sound natural. So we'll just adjust our speed to off.
Another day, somebody else could come along and steal your heart away.
All right, so let's say I want to take like maybe this whole vocal file here, and I wanted to do tuning where it's more kind of graphic editing based. What I'll do now is just come directly here, and we could go into our sample editor to Very Audio. And when we go to Very Audio, it's gonna do an analysis of our particular file. All right, so let's go ahead. And as we do this, so now we could say, okay.
Will we ever understand the way that things would go?
So let's say, okay, let's check like this phrase of notes, and we want to just kind of tune those. We could grab like the bottom handle here and
Way that things would go. Can you feel it now? Was it meant to be? Or will the memories all
so let's say, okay, let's check the pitch. Let's say this note was, let's say flat. So if we listen to this, we could go. We can now just kind of come here. If we go to the bottom center, we could just kind of nudge that particular note. I could take entire phrases of notes. If I want to go to the top center, we could adjust the vibrato. If we have notes that, let's say we want to have, these are kind of, we have different smart controls. So we could also come over here on particular notes. And let's say like this pitch is kind of maybe going up too much for our liking. We could move like this little diamond here and just say, okay, I'm going to grab this handle, and then we could bring that handle down. We could also come over and like if we have notes that are kind of scooping up, we could adjust that. We could also choose these little triangles in the upper right hand corner and say, okay, I want the transitions of the notes to make sense. Like this note's going to be a little flat going into this note. But if we had two different pitches, I may want to adjust kind of the vibrato in the middle, but have the vibrato have natural transitions going into the next note, so we can set a range of different areas. So there's lots of amazing kind of vocal tuning that's in Cubase. And so where you want like a real-time plugin, you could do that directly with the pitch correct, or if you want it more kind of graphic editing using Very Audio. All right, so we see Randy Lee just letting us know that 432 squared is 186,000 speed of light approximately. It's good to know. It's good trivia. All right, so we see from FlyV says, what's the reason my settings were writing songs at 44.1K? I now have changed to 48K. What's that's for? So you could really, sometimes depending on your audio interface settings, if you drop an audio file in that's 44.1, maybe a loop or something like that, depending on your preferences. So if we come over here to your preferences, there's a preference here if you go to editing to audio to automatically convert on importing files to convert to the project settings. If that's not set and you imported a 44.1 file, then the Cubase project would be at 44.1. So that could cause it maybe to change sample rates. So again, check the, and you could always check going into your project setup. If you hit Shift plus the letter S, and you could just check the project sample rate right there. And you could also access that menu just by going to the project menu to project sample rate or project setup, and then the sample rate settings are there. All right, so we have Klaus Jürgen Schmiel, just from Germany. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see contrast power 6302 says, hey Greg, when I click a single, maybe a single note, maybe with acoustic feedback, I hear the sound, but when I select more than one sound or chord, I don't hear. So generally, let's see, I think we'll have, so let's say if we come over here and so let's go ahead and just activate our acoustic feedback. Not sure if this is actually routed anywhere. Let me just.
Oh, stepping over every wall and standing in the way. You were easy to love.
All right, so when you come here, so generally when you do this, you click on a single event. You could do that. So it's kind of whatever you're actually clicking on. So, and since we could select kind of one event, so whatever you actually click on is what is heard. So since you're not clicking on 5 events, even though multiple 5 events may be selected, you hear whatever the one is that you click on right there. So that's kind of the design intention. Sorry, my chat field jumped. All right, so we see that Klaus is saying, what? It's not Friday? All right. All right, so we see Flyv just says, I just finished my first album by Wavelab, but now I'm out of luck because I can't afford the program while it's on sale. You know, check out, there is a Wavelab Elements that gets you a lot of the same functionality, maybe without surround sound, and that usually, you know, is often, you know, sold for less. So definitely check out Wavelab Elements as well. All right, so wonderful to see John Barry joining from South Devon, England. Okay, so we see from Flyv just says adding a groove agent is fine for now, and I have others within my MIDI programs. All right, so we have Steve Vieira 70 just sending greetings from Belfast in Northern Ireland. Thanks for joining us. You know, Memento wants people to whack the like button. All right, so Jazz Dude is just sharing a link to a tutorial on creating pumping, groove, and rhythm effects with the Cubase plugins you probably never used. All right, so we see from Del Sur Music just says, hello Greg, how can I drop a marker on the go on Mac? Do I need to create a key command or a macro? All right, so if you wanted to, like while it's playing, so let's say if we're doing this, I could just click here and drop markers just by clicking on the marker track itself.
You were easy to love, easy to keep. All those promises were made.
So again, you can just click right there. That will drop a marker.
Was no way.
And there is, you don't have to create a macro for it, but if we go to your key commands, all right, so I think that we could just like insert marker. Add position marker, let's say on active marker track. So I will just come over here. I'm going to hit the insert key. I have kind of a dual, let's see. So usually Mac keyboards don't have an insert key, which is the default. So now when I come over here, so you could drop it in with a key command just like that, or while it's playing, you could just click here on the markers. So again, go to your key commands. And you could just add position marker. So let's say if I just come here, I'll assign it to a different key command. So just look under insert. I think it's position or marker. All right, so now I've assigned a key command to it. So that way you could just drop markers in that way. So just create the key command. Very great to see. Benny says to send you an email again with more info. So it'd be great. Thanks for resending the templates. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on. I guess she's like number 33. All right, so Sue's just saying, says I have an audio interface, 2 inputs, trying to figure out in control room how to set up second keyboard for earphones not picked up by recording. So, you know, if you have, it could really depend on your audio interface. You know, so if your audio interface has more than one more than one input, you know, if it has more than one headphone out, you could send it to, you know, whatever available inputs and outputs. So you say how to set up a second keyboard for earphones not picked up by recording. So I'm not sure if you want to monitor. You know, you could configure it like if you wanted to have keyboards that are always sounding. If you go to your audio connections and if you go to control rooms and you have available inputs, you could add, if you right click, we could add an external input. So you could say this is your keyboard, or like, you know, your tablet. You know, see a lot of people have Amazon Echoes in your studio to use as references, so you could connect it as an external source as well, be able to switch. But if you let me know, Sue, exactly what you want to do, we could probably show that to you. All right, so we have Zounds by Timo, just saying Sheboygan in the house. Yeah, don't you know? All right. We have DJ Ice 1804 saying hello everybody, hope everyone's having a great day. Music is life, nothing else matters. It just says hi Greg. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we see from Flyv says, how do you make sure a drum track remains on time throughout production, quantize, and different counts on drums, 16th, etc., to fit your 1+2, 1 and maybe like 1+2 +3 +4 plus, or 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So, I always, the one thing that most drummers will hate is like if you're recording them and you put the click track on and compare their recording to a particular click. So, often, we could all program drums that are perfectly in time, fine. And, it used to be that, people would hire, like 40 years ago, people would have drum machines because, it could be expensive if the drummer wasn't playing perfect. And now we could have a machine that would play perfectly. And then people got tired, and when machines that could play perfectly were very accessible and easy for everyone to own, then everyone wanted a real drum feel. That was kind of the exotic thing, to have a real drum recording. So when I do kind of rhythmic correction or quantization, I tend not to, like if I'm doing quantizing, I often just close my eyes and just quantize what bothers me. If I need to do rhythmic correction on a particular song, I don't necessarily apply it automatically. When I hear something that seems out of time that I can fix, that I don't maybe want to record again, then I will fix that. But if I'm looking at something and it's like, like this pad instance here, this is an amazing keyboard player, and if we listen to it, we can say,
Easy to keep all those promises when
and we can see that technically it's ahead of the beat.
there was no way we could know where we
So we're gonna have kind of staggered notes here.
and the way that things would go. Can you feel it now? Was it meant to be?
So does it sound like it's early? Is it messing anything up? It doesn't bother me rhythmically at all, so I wouldn't necessarily go and rhythmically quantize or fix something if it wasn't bothering me listening to it. So hopefully that helps, Vince. Let's see. Vince is saying he's glad it's not a Zoom today. He's still in his PJs. So yeah, I think we'll do kind of our last meeting maybe on the like 2 weeks from today of the year. I'll just look at my calendar. So I will take time off for the holidays. So maybe the last Zoom, we'll see if it might be the 19th or the 23rd. Maybe I might do the 23rd. So, but let me know if the 23rd is too close to Christmas for the holidays. It's the day before Christmas Eve. Or we could wrap up on the 19th, which would be a week from this upcoming Friday. So let me know in the comments. Okay, so we see Tim Weinheimer just says, hello, Greg. How would I be able to use a logical editor to cut a MIDI track at every bar in the song so I don't have to manually do it on every bar? Okay, so there's sometimes when we use modifiers with particular, so let's say I want to take like this pad apart here and I want to split it at every bar. All right, so I'm going to come over here. We're going to make sure that snap is turned on. So just make sure that this is enabled. I'm going to set my grid here. I'm going to snap, then I'm going to move over one bar and hold down the Alt or Option key. And what this will do is until this event ends, it will now split every single measure. So when we look at it, so you don't need anything fancy, just kind of a modifier key. So again, to do that, if I say, okay, I want to split here, and now I want to hold down the Alt or Option key before using the split tool, and I move it over one measure, like from measure 9 to measure 10, and then it will automatically split at each bar for you. And if I wanted to do like every 3 beats, I could just split every 3 beats like that as well. So whatever the distance from the previous cut to the next cut, while holding Alt or Option down, it will now automatically do even splits of the events throughout the project, like so. All right, wonderful to see Balsa. It says, greetings from Montenegro. I want to record each note of a kalimba and designate each note to a sampler MIDI key. Is there a way to do that in Cubase? Okay, so let me just see. I think I may have just kind of a project to do this. All right, so I did something similar. All right, so I just set up, so we look at this, like I wanted to sample like my jazz bass. So I come over here, if I play that particular note. So what I did is I sampled like each string on my bass. So if I wanted to play an F note, and let's say I want to do an F sharp. So I just created different tracks and I labeled these like this is the E string, F sharp. All right, and this will be a G string. This is a G. All right, so now I could come over. So let's say I wanted to go to my G2. And why I did this was because I may want to actually, so let's say I play this G string. So that's on the 15th fret of the E string. But let's go to my let's say I go to my G string here. And that G, while it's the same pitch, if I play this particular note, would have a much different feel because it's playing on a different string. So if I wanted to, let's say, take these particular notes, I could, if you wanted to do this inside of Cubase, you could grab the particular, let's just open up an instance of Groove Agent. You could do this in Hallian, not Hallian Sonic that comes with Cubase, but let's add an instance of Groove Agent. All right, so I want this to start on E. So I'm going to take these particular samples here, say from my E string. Then I just drag them on. So now, and if we want to come over here, so once we do this, I can now, and we could choose to have these. So let's say, okay, I want my polyphony to be 1. So, and we could have our playback mode. So we'll go to our sample and we'll say play until release. And now, and let me do that for all the samples here. And then we could also just kind of set up, like different groups. So you could just simply take your, is it your kalimba or marimba? A kalimba, and just simply drag that in. Now, if we have an instance of Hallian, all we would have to do is I will just come over here. Let's add an instance of howling in the sampler. And I can say, okay, let's just do default. I'm just going to drag all these samples right here. And we can say, okay, we want the key range from the sample name. And we'll start, let's say, at E1. And now when I come over here, we go to our sample zone. So we could just say, okay, let's go to our mapping. And now each of this, so as soon as I come over here, we could just play our sounds just like that in Hallian. So you could do it inside a Groove Agent, or you could do it directly inside of Hallian if you wanted to, if you own Hallian, but it's super easy. And then you could send a key switch to, okay, I want to play this note from the A string to E string to D string to G string if you wanted to inside of Hallian. So you could have different articulations to automatically extract and play notes on different strings if you wanted to set it up that way. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so you see Fly-V says gotten through a lot. We said 2 weeks ago, Greg, about Wavelab. Now I've mastered an album that's just on release tonight. Congratulations on your release. That's a big deal. So it takes a lot of time and effort to get a release done. Congratulations. Everyone give kudos to Fly-V for getting his project done. All right, Onan 4453 just says Cubase is the best, and he says, can you show me the arpeggio? Okay, so let's come over. There's a couple different arpeggios. So we have some as like MIDI inserts. So let's come over. Okay, so let's say I have a retro log bass sound. All right, and what we want to do now is I'm going to go to my MIDI inserts. And now if we want a very simple arpeggio, I can now hold down a chord. So, and we could have these arpeggios go up, then down, or only up, or only down, or random. So I could just hold down different chords if I wanted to change voicings. Or we could have user patterns as well. So we can say, okay, let's come over and be able and let's say, okay, I want this to change the rhythm of it. So I want the note length. So let's say if I come here. But let's say I want the note length to be 30-second notes. So as I and let's make the note length. So that's like the simple kind of arpeggiator, and there's a more complex one where we could, and that's going to be called Apache SX. So we'll come over And this would allow us to just take a particular sequence of events. So if we have MIDI data on a particular track, I could drag and drop any MIDI part and use that as the basis. We could have kind of different arpeggio styles here. You could have one-shot mode. So all sorts of great presets to kind of work with. So you want to hit like retain the velocities. So let's say I so if you just want to trigger accents with velocity by hitting that particular key harder, you could do that as well. And one of the cool things that a lot of people don't realize is we could take our arpeggios and actually record them directly into our system. So let's say I want to take, this particular retro log track here. So I think this is. So if we go to our MIDI effects and we see this little line, move that line down. And now as we record, the effect, I'm just going to hold down a basic chord, as I see here. Alright, so I'm going to hit record here. So, and now once we do that, the arpeggio itself has been recorded directly into the project. So you could record with the arpeggiators or just have the MIDI data play back with them. So that's one of the arpeggiators is a MIDI plugin. There's other ways to get arpeggios as well. But let me know on in 4453 if that works. All right, we see Michael Marshall joining from Somerset, UK. Okay, sorry, my chat field jumped. Let me find my spot. Okay, so we have Matt Elliston. Just says, hello, Greg. Thank you for your amazing product support. It's very much appreciated. Thanks to Jazz Dude, HK, Jan, and Michael Teams, as well as the awesome Cubase community. Right, Tim Weinheimer is wishing well to Sable Winters. All right, so we see Tim K joining from Zeist in the Netherlands. Waves a paw hello to Steven, my cat Stella, Mark Raven's dog, and other pets that are nearby. All right, Balsa just says, I just realized that Beat Butcher is the author of all hip-hop samples in Cubase. He's one of the top-selling sample pack guys in hip-hop. It's crazy. We get like his sounds incorporated with Cubase. Yep, and you don't have to pay anything. So that's why sometimes some third-party companies, have an interesting relationship with Steinberg because we invented the VST plugin, but often many of our users don't have the need to purchase as many third-party plugins as other programs. All right, so we see FlyV just says, how can I make sure that MIDI recordings are on the proper grid type during recording? So if you wanted to record MIDI that's going to be kind of automatically aligned to the grid. So let's come over here. All right, so we could do, there's on the transport, you'll see this AQ, and this is going to be auto quantize. Okay, so when I come over here, let's say I want it auto quantize, I'm going to set my quantize value to eighth notes. So let's say I'm just going to come over and we'll put my click on. And now as we hit record, and I'll just have this. So let's say I just put in hi-hats. All right, so I'll just do that one more time just so I don't hit. Sorry, I have my laptop kind of blocking my MIDI controller here. All right, so let's say we have it, our AQ. Sorry, I'll just hit the right key this time. Sorry, it's annoying. All right. All right. All right, so now anytime that I record, let me just do just a small section of that again. Sorry, I'll just. All right. All right, so I'm just kind of randomly hitting hi-hats. All right, so now when we play it back, we're going to set, since we had AQ on, everything is now perfectly quantized. So we can quantize on input. Now let's say, and we look at it and we go, oh, okay, that's all perfectly quantized, our intention, but let's say, oh, maybe I wanted to capture exactly what I played. So even though it quantized the input, we can go to the edit menu and just choose reset quantize. And now it's back to exactly what I had inputted. Even though we quantized on input, the original data is preserved. So if we undo that. So now if I want to do my drums. So now we could just quantize. So if you want your MIDI to be locked kind of to the grid, you can now just simply come right over there and have the proper, that recordings that are always going to be on the grid if you want. All right, so we see from Contrast Power 6302 says just figured out yesterday that when we drag a reverb to the send channel, it creates the send channel and connects it automatically. Earlier I used to create manually. So there's a couple different ways. So let's say I have, let's say if I want to send a particular reverb, just find. Okay, so let's say, we have like reverb on a vocal here. All right, so let's say we have our sends here, so we could go to our effects, and just as you mentioned, you could just say, okay, I want to take my Revelation reverb and just drag and drop, and that will automatically do it there. We could also just drag and drop it to an insert as well. To get rid of a insert effect, you can just drag it away. So fast ways. Another way to do it that a lot of people miss, if you don't want to manually add is you could just right click here and say add effects to send one, and you can say, okay, I want this to be my studio delay, and now my delay is automatically routed. So a couple ways of kind of speeding up the workflow, whether you want to drag and drop or just right click and add a particular add a particular effect to particular send slots. So Sue's just asking Greg, wondering if you're able to find a demo project for Howling in 7. Thanks. I haven't found it yet. I still have a couple old computers that are kind of buried farther in like a storage closet. I'll see if I could dig it up. But I haven't found it yet. Usually I have some that are just like stored on different like cloud services as backups, but I haven't found that one I was thinking of. All right, so John Barry just says, hi Greg, I noticed that your Right Zone control room, you have a phone section, but on my Windows 11, no phones in Right Zone, but on a pop-out and in the little CR, the meters section of the Right Zone. So, all right, so when I go to my control room here, you may notice that there is a phones section, and that's because within the control room, I have set up, if you go to the audio connections and go to your control room, you want to right-click, and then you could say, okay, I just want to add a phones channel. Now, kind of the intention of the phones channel is that it could be used to preview independently. So we'll have a lot of composers, a lot of like hip hop artists who work with assistants, and often there is a preference that the control room can be. So if we go to your settings, and we go or to your preferences and we go to control room, we could say use the phones as the preview channel. So the assistant could be going through and doing tuning. The assistant could be searching for loops while they wear headphones. So if we're over here, we can say, okay, I want to go to my media bay and I want to audition different loops here. We could just say, okay, now I want the assistant could go through and audition and hear it in the headphones without going into the speakers, like interfering with the producer, engineer, or client. So this way, the second is, like the second assistant or the assistant engineer could like go through and audition sounds and have that going through a separate headphone output. And at that point, when you have this separate headphone out, you can just simply, that way it's not going, like the client and producer don't have to hear it. So I remember being in Nashville once, and it was kind of a legendary 70s singer. And the assistant was actually just doing tuning in the headphones, and he was kind of seated off to the side. And, and at one point, and it was all done entirely in the headphones. So that, at one point it was kind of humorous because the singer was like, oh, I thought I was going to have to sing that again. And the assistant actually had tuned it all in very audio while they were just kind of shooting the breeze, and just kind of played it back, and the artist never realized that it was fixed because it wasn't going through the speakers, it was all going through the headphone channel. So it's kind of a separate headphone preview and monitoring channel, but you don't see it unless you actually have it added in your control room. So when I come over here, we can see that I have a phones channel. So just right click, and then once you have your phones channel, it will be visible in your control room. All right, so we see from Sue says, follow up on setting up a second keyboard. I want to use a secondary keyboard to play harmony notes to keep my voice in tune while recording my vocals. So a lot of times, there is, if you wanted to take your vocals, and let's say if we have our inserts here, so let's come over to the pitch correct plugin. So we'll go under pitch shift to the pitch correct, and at this point we could say our scale source will be external MIDI note. So this could be from any source that you want. So this will actually, tune the particular note based on the MIDI that you play in. So what we need to do now is that we have, let's say, the pitch correct plugin enabled, and we need to then add a MIDI track. So this isn't necessarily through the control room. And we want to say the MIDI output is going to the plugins. And at this point, we want it to go, let's see. I think it might go, let me find just the name, Audio 01. So set the output. All right, so we see that we go to on audio insert 1. So we will just come directly over here. So audio 06. And then we send that MIDI into the pitch correct plugin. So if we open up our pitch correct plugin, so we're going to add that particular track. And then as we sing, we can just come over here, and as we hit notes on the MIDI controller, and I'll just show it here. So as I would hit notes, we would see that those particular notes is what the tuning would gravitate to. So it may not do harmonies, but if you're kind of singing, and if you're singing one note and playing a different note, but you could do tuning that way as well, kind of in real time, and drive the pitch of the tuning or the pitch of the note based on MIDI input if you wanted it. All right, so we see Sue just asking, what is the phone's channel and the preview channel? Is this related to the above recording issue? So I think, let me know if when we just went through it for John Barry, if you need more explanation. All right, so Soren says 19th and 23rd is all right for me. Either way, I hope I can participate. Yeah, so maybe we'll do 23rd, might be a little too close for Christmas, but I'll take a look and see. I'll see what my family schedule is too, and how much vacation time I need to burn before the end of the year, so I don't lose a bunch of vacation time. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, wow, simpler than I thought. Thanks, just with the key command. So yeah, check out all the tools, because a lot of them will have like great modifiers. So let's say if I come here and I split, I know a lot of guys would do, like in Austin, they used to call it kind of like cut and run vocal automation, where they would just come over here and say, okay, I want to cut every measure. And then they would just do, their clip gain changes for every single measure on a vocal. But let's say if we have all these, like a whole MIDI event here. So if I say would cut and option, if I wanted to glue all these together, so instead of gluing one by one, I could also just hold down Alt or Option plus the glue tool and join them all together. So a couple different techniques. So a lot of times the tools will have kind of alternate or kind of multifunctional modes, depending on like different modifiers, and you can set those in the preferences. So Sue says, must say that watching it operate is illuminating. It's amazing how many capabilities Cubase has. For example, the Alt cut shortcut, brilliant. Yeah, so there's a lot of smart guys or a lot of smart people that make Cubase, because we have a lot of female developers as well at Steinberg. So a lot of smart people with really good planning and great intention of design. All right, so Sable is just saying, Tim just learned something new. Me too. All right, so Randy Lee Music just says, always learning here. Sable Winters just says, Flyvy, that releases are like jumping into a giant tub of red paint. So just so much great opportunities to learn new stuff and get stuff done faster. All right, so we have Marin Subasic saying hi from Cologne, Germany. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're having a great evening in Cologne. Thanks for being part of the community. All right, we see Rick from Bratman Studio saying hello to everyone. Says, hope all is well and the music is flowing from your fingers. All right, and Marin Subasic says, just coming back to Cubase after many years on other DAWs. It's great. So we're welcome to have you back, and we hope to see you on many more live streams so we get you up to speed. All right, so Trade-In 6279 says, hi there. When will the Splice rent-to-own plan going to get an upgrade to 15? I can't wait to use the new Yamaha Vocals plugin. So I'm not kind of in those discussions of when like Splice is updated, but check with Splice, because sometimes if I don't use the system, and maybe Flyvy could comment, because I think he's on the Splice rent to own. If you're not familiar with that, if you can't outlay all the money for Cubase, you could do like a rent to own through Splice, and that would allow you to pay X number of dollars per month until the program is paid off, and then you own it. But if you can't do the initial outlay financially, which we understand, you could do kind of the rent-to-own model through Splice. I'm not sure. I could see if I could get an answer. But I know sometimes people are still doing their 14, and maybe they don't look for 15. But you may have to get a certain amount on 14 or pay the difference to go up to 15 if you're haven't done the full rent, if you're not at the ownership level through Splice on 14. But I could see if I could find out for you for Friday's live stream. All right, so we have Brian DeBaird saying big howdy from Yuma, Arizona. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're well. All right, so we see Brian asks a question. I have a piano piece that suddenly stopped, and I want to stretch where it dropped to the next note. What is the best way? Cubase 15 Pro. So I'm not sure if it's going to be, I'm not sure if it's audio or MIDI, so if it is MIDI, here, let me just create. so let's say. All right, so I'll just try to record something. We'll see if we can do both MIDI and audio. Okay, so let's come over here. So say we have, so if it's in the MIDI domain, you know, what you could do is, so let's go ahead and we'll blow this up. So we could try just doing, if we go to functions, let's say the legato. So I think that we could do kind of a, just all right. So I mean, MIDI, we could obviously just kind of come here and extend the chords like so. So now if we want to listen to it. All right, now let's see if we do this kind of as audio. Might be a little trickier, but let's go ahead and just render that. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to our audio here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just do some free warping on it. So if we want to double click here, let's just go to like our audio warp. We'll enable free warp. So what I can do now is I'm going to place an audio warp marker here and one here. And then like where this is kind of fading out, I could just extend that over. So let's say we'll, so let's say I want to take this and this point and we could just extend that over with free warp. And it might be, so you could just kind of extend out. So let's say, okay, I want to take this point here. If we wanted to kind of stretch this out, I could say, okay, let's stretch, put in another point, stretch, put in our point. So we could just kind of, so you could kind of do free warping to stretch a bit as well if it's in the audio domain. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, so we see from Rick from Bratman Studios says, "Hey Greg, just got a weird one in the middle of playing. An e-license problem occurred. E-license is hanging. Restart if you want to use it. Mac Studio Wi-Fi and Ethernet cable from modem. Thanks. So make sure, like, depending on, it could be maybe that there are some libraries, like, you might have an expansion library for Hallian. If you have an older one, you could, there might be, so while Hallian is on Steinberg licensing, you may have a library that's on eLicenser. If you go to activate a license that's on eLicenser that hasn't been migrated to the Steinberg licensing, you may get a message like that. So if you could let me know if it's like a particular patch that you do it, that you get that particular message. So, but it could be a library that's not authorized that's installed on your system, or if it's installed, it may have to be migrated in your My Steinberg account area from the Steinberg eLicenser to Steinberg licensing. Okay, he says Rick just says playing a percussion setting on Hallian 7 with trip front end. All right, wonderful to see Peter checking in from Montreal. Says happy Tuesday, brothers and sisters. Thanks for joining us. All right, we see Michael Teams joining from Weatherford, Texas. We won't give you a tardy slip today, but you got to give everyone good ice cream flavors. And he's already doing that, giving Jazz Dude 1 gallon of chocolate eclair ice cream. Now I think Sable's going to be jealous. Or she's Neapolitan. All right, so Bratman Studio just says, hey Greg, hit dismiss, then activation manager came up, said something, we're not activated. Not Hallian 7 though, so activated them anyway and went back to Hallian, and that works. Yeah, so make sure like all of like the Hallian instruments, so Hallian could be authorized, but maybe you downloaded an instrument you don't have a license for. All right, so Martin Subasic says, thank you for your great work, Greg. So, no, thanks for being on the live stream and asking questions, being part of the community. Okay, so we see John Barry says, Greg found it in the right zone control room. There is a setup sections. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Thanks for reminding me. So in case something you have configured isn't showing up in the control room, you could right click and go to setup sections, and you could turn the phones on or off there. Thanks for reminding me and making that comment, John. Appreciate it. All right, so we're seeing Brian. So you're just saying it's audio, so for the piano. So thanks for the clarification. All right, so we see From Steve Green 8208 says, hello Greg, remind me how in Media Bay I can get to see all bass drums listed or all snare drums so I can audition each one to choose the right one for the song. Okay. So let's just come over here. I'll just do a new project. All right, say we want to go like, snare hunting. So let's just add quick. We'll just do a drum track here. Okay. So let's say we want to just go to Media Bay. So here I could just say snare. Okay. So let's say I'll just find a quick snare sample. So I'll just drag this sample onto my drums here. Okay, so I will come over. Sorry, that's annoyingly loud. All right. All right, so let's say now I want to just come over. Let's get to our pattern editor here. All right, so let's come over to our drum machine. So I'm going to just select this, and then we could do what we call kind of a hot swap. And let's go to Media Bay here. So I just typed in snare. So I'll just, again, come here. And then we could just continue to audition and kind of hot swap. Now let's say if we have like a snare drum that's used multiple times in a project. So let's say I turn this on and I have a snare sample that's just kind of in the particular project here. So let's say, okay, we have this and I'm repeating it multiple times here. So let's say I hold down my Alt Option key, and now I want to just duplicate that particular range. So let's say I have my snare drum that's laid out for me here, and I wanted to replace like with a different snare. If I drag this over, so I have this same audio file being used multiple times in a project, but if I drag this over while holding down the Shift key, I can now just replace all of the samples with the new sample. And we'll get, so do you want to modify all the events that refer to the same audio material? So we can say yes. So and now I could just, any time that you have one sample that's being used repeatedly, just drag it over, hold down the Shift key, and then you could modify all of those particular samples with your new sample like that. So in the sampler track, in Groove Agent, the drum machine, or the project window, you could easily kind of replace and audition different snare samples easily. We see that Michael Teams was in therapy for his hand, but we hope everything's going well. All right, and Rick has received 1 gallon of lemon meringue pie ice cream. All right, just reading through comments. All right, Brian DeBear says, that's what I was looking for, Greg. Thanks, you're the best. So glad to help. All right, so we see from Sue says, thanks, I accept the pitch correct routing through the MIDI channel, but I'm not getting any sound through my earphones, so that while I'm recording my piano, I can keep my voice in tune at the same time. So I'm not sure if so the pitch, it may be, it may not follow the piano chords. So if you're kind of playing the chords and then hoping that the pitch navigates to a particular chord, it may not do that. Let me just take a look at the pitch correct plugin again. And whether it's going through headphones or just your main speakers, that could be just a setting on your particular audio interface. So let me know if you hear it in the speakers but not the headphones. Then it could be something in the control room. But I think mostly like the pitch shift or the pitch correct here when you go to, so if you go to, your external MIDI notes. So I'm not sure if it would, if you played like, a piano chord and you're trying to get the pitch to, go to the piano chord, it may just be looking for a single MIDI note to determine the pitch as opposed to like an entire chord. Michael Team says, darn it, I can't find a question as I was going to ask. My filing system is not the best. There's a great thing called computers you can put notes on. It's really handy. I'm sure you'll find it. We hope to help you out. All right, Uno Memento is just saying hi to Michael Teams and Brian Sawyer. All right, so we see that Tim K has firefighters practicing across the street, distracting, but I'm learning some new things anyway. All right, John Barry says he likes the new faster meters in Cubase 15. Yes, if you're not familiar with that, it was one of the things that was added in 15. So the meter fallback time. So we go to your settings and go to metering appearance. Maybe there's meters. So you see that you could now have up to 80 dB a second for your meters fallback. So it could be like twice as fast. So depending how you want to see it. So if you're not aware of that preference, check that out. Thanks for mentioning that, John. Little things like that can take a long time coding-wise to do, so it's nice that people notice it. Okay. So you see from Bratman Studio, it says, Greg, if I have a loop through trip on Hallion 7 and I want the part to show in a track, how do I pull it over to the track so I can edit it too? Okay, so let's take a look. All right, it says come over here to trip. All right. Okay, so let's see if I have a loop, perk drive through trip on Hallion 7, and I want the part to show in a track. How do I pull it over to the track so I can edit it too? So let me just see if we... Alright, let me just see if we can... So I think, is this what you mean by the loop? Because if that is on loop, so it may just take like this particular bass voice. Let me see if the perk drive is one of the presets. Yeah, so let's take a look at this. So I think if it, when this loop is activated, it may just stop that particular one, like for the arpeggiator. So now it'll play through once, and then if we wanted to, so I'm not sure if it's, and I don't think it's an actual audio loop. That loop is just gonna, like, you could hold the key down and in the arpeggio section you could swing it. So let me know if this is the loop you're referring to, Rick. Oh, and you see Jazz Dude just saying it's probably a flex phraser preset. So let's take a look. That, so yeah, it's not a flex phraser. So I think we go here to the arpeggiator. That, you know, that the arpeggiator we have automatically turned on here, so we could trigger different arpeggiators. Let me know if this is the loop that you're talking about, Rick. Okay. Yeah, Jazzy says it's a flex phraser preset, so I don't think so. When we go to this and like, let's say if we go to that the flex phraser isn't active, I think it's just going to be all right. So we see from Rick just says yes, but I want to drag it to the track and play with it. So I don't think that the arpeggiator, we'll take a look at the macro page. Some of them you can record the arpeggiators, and let's see if we go sometimes we can look under the hood here. So I think it's just going to be like the LFO that's doing that. So I don't think it could be dragged over. Let's come over here. So we get I don't think that we could drag these over. So it might be just kind of inherent to the particular instrument. Yes, I don't think that may work where that particular arpeggio could be kind of dragged out to it. Okay, so we see from Sue says yes, I'm trying to wrap my head around setting up the control room to enable this vocal workflow approach. So if you want it to be like where you're playing chords and you want the live vocal to immediately kind of follow like the chords that you're playing, it may not be the right tool because the latency can be a little high on that particular plugin. So when we go to like a pitch correct plugin here, I think it's like around 50 milliseconds. So let's come over to pitch shift and pitch correct, and so it's about 40 milliseconds of latency. So it may not be kind of the right tool where if you wanted to automatically, move to the nearest note of the piano chord that you're playing. I don't think the design intention for that is a design intention. I think what it'll allow you to do is to kind of take a vocal, and if you have a MIDI part, output that MIDI part so that you could give it a reference, a MIDI, like a reference of pitch for that particular MIDI event for it to kind of navigate to. But it's not kind of like a Digitech vocalist type of workflow. And also, Sue, I'm not sure if you mentioned like if it's working out of your speakers or if it's working out of or if it's working out of your speakers but not the headphones. If you could let us know that. Yeah, so, but going back to Rick's question about that particular phrase, I don't think that we could, just drag that particular phrase out. Let me see if it's, let's take a look. If we go to the browser page here in Hallion, the program tree. Okay, so here's a flex phraser. It looks like that flex phraser is off. Okay, so, all right, so here's what you could do, Rick. Sorry about that. So you'll see this load area here in the right zone, and then you'll see program. And to see this initially, you may have to, so let's say we go to add our instrument track. Let's go to Hallion 7. Okay, just go to like a default screen set. We could load up that perk drive. So Jazz Dude was right, as he always is. So we'll come over here. So let's find the trip again. Okay, so we'll come over here. So we load this up and all right, so you'll see the program tree, and then this is kind of all the different elements that make up that particular sound. So we could say, let's go to trip. So it might be a combination of those particular alphas. Let's go to this particular flex phraser. So if you kind of just so now we go to this particular flex phraser. We can see that. And now we could just click on record. So I'm going to just record one particular note. All right, we're going to stop recording. And now I could drag this phrase over. And then if we go to the second arpeggiator, so we go to this flex phraser, I'll record this. We'll put it into slot 2. Okay, so we'll stop recording and we'll drag arpeggiator 2 over. And now if you want to edit it, we can just come right over here, and then you could have those particular phrases to edit. So let's say that's the second phrase. This will be kind of the first phrase, and both of those together can make up that particular. So again, to access that, make sure that you have this program tree. So if you might see load here, just get to the program tree, open up, expand your different instances of trips. So when we go to the macro page here, we can see that we have kind of trip 1, trip 2. So this is almost like the list editor for all of the different things. And then you could just simply, if we go to edit and then you'd want to just simply go to probably like your MIDI modulation, and then when you select this, then that particular phrase will be available, and you could capture it and drag and drop. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. I haven't played with Trip in a while. Okay. See, Jazz Dude posted the in-depth guide, and you probably wouldn't be able to see that particular level of kind of granularity when utilizing like Howling and Sonic, but the full Howling you can. See, Bratman Studio just says, wow, so deep but possible, amazing, but you got there. Thank you. It can be done. So, yeah, that's my, see, I tell people I learned something on every live stream, and that'll be my one new thing that I have learned. All right, so we're seeing John Barry's just saying next Friday the 19th might be better for the Zoom. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards the 19th, but if anyone has any like super strong feelings, but thanks for letting me know, John. So let me know if that makes sense. So a week from Friday, if that will be the last live stream of the month, or we could do our Zoom social. All right, let me go to a couple questions that were sent in advance. All right, so the first question we had says, hi, I have a problem with the startup of Cubase 15. When it's initializing ARA services, it crashes. If I deactivate third-party plugins in safe mode, it will run. I cannot figure out what is causing the problem, and don't see any blocked plugins in the list or whatsoever. Once I synced the plugins in the plugin manager, everything works fine. Running Sequoia 15.7.2. So sometimes ARA services are, an extension. So if you're not familiar with what ARA is doing, so let's say if we have a particular sample here or an audio file, okay, so what ARA does is basically and there's a limited number of programs that really run under ARA. So I think Auto-Tune can do it now, Melodyne, if you have Synchro Arts, like Vocal Line, Spectral Layers, Wavelab. So check when you open it up, let me know if what we have with an ARA extension is basically allows us to kind of work and edit audio in an external editor instead of the sample editor. So if I want to come here and let's say, okay, I have no extension, so what I want to do is instead of when I double click now, it'll open up Wavelab in the sample editor. So now I could do my editing in Wavelab directly inside of Cubase, or we could also have something like Spectral Layers. So Spectral Layers and Wavelab are ARA tools. So it's probably not going to be all plugins, but plugins that are specifically running ARA. So I would find one of those. So think of maybe Auto-Tune if you have later versions of Auto-Tune, Melodyne, Spectral Layers, Wavelab from Steinberg, and those are some of the main ones that run as ARA, and probably one of those tools will need to be updated. All right, so I think this was a question we had from Sue on the last live stream I was playing around with. So about a message about, it says no grid editing when tempo is ramped. So let's take a quick look at that. So okay, so just come over here. All right, so let's say I have a tempo map here. All right, now as we put in tempo changes, if I start this with ramp, okay, so let me just, I'll undo that, I'll just save. Okay. All right, so now when I come over here, I don't really necessarily have a tempo. Let me just adjust my... Okay, so when we want to do kind of warp, like free warping, and I come here, so I'll just put in some free warp markers. Okay, so now I can move my warp material, but let's add a tempo map now. Okay, so I'm going to add, when I add a tempo map, or tempo track rather, so let's say my tempo track here is set to ramp mode. Now, if the very first node was set to ramp mode, so you may have to adjust that very first node and change that to step. And you know, and you might have to, so now let's say if I do, but it really depends on the very first tempo node too. So now if we change that to step, if you get that message, try just changing the very first mode. So let's say if I come here, let's change that first one to ramp. You may get that message, but try just to select that very first node and switch it to step. And I think that will resolve that particular error message for you. All right, and then we had a question last time about how to add objects for like a Dolby Atmos. And I was having a big brain cramp with that on Friday, so I wanted to show everyone how to do that. All right, so when working in Atmos, activate the project here. All right, so just so to get a track in object mode, what we want to do is to actually just select the particular tracks, and when we go to our project window here and we go to ADM authoring, we want to just simply take the selected tracks, and when we're in our ADM authoring, again under project, then we could take the selected tracks and just come here and create objects from the selected tracks. All right, next question that was mailed in. Does Cubase or Nuendo 14 have chroma key, blue screen, green screen effects? Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So generally, yeah, you know, I think that's more like video editing, like nonlinear video editing tools. So there's not like an automatic green screen or blue screen support for video. So, you know, usually kind of the workflow is that the video is done and will be handed off to you, and you're going to be composing or doing your audio post-production to the provided video. but you're not necessarily going to say, okay, I want to, hide the background and do a chroma key where I replace the background and, the person isn't wearing green or blue and they won't disappear, so that's going to be more of a video editing function. All right, our next question. It says, hi Greg, previously in Cubase when creating a new instrument track, it would remember the last used output. For me, typically this was a sub bus. Now in Cubase 15, no matter what, it always reverts back to the stereo outs. I have to reset it. Can you check that please? Okay, so let's take a look. So let's say I'm going to add an instrument track. Let me create like a bus or group track. Okay, so I want to add an instrument track. All right, so its output, I want to send it to my drum group here. So once I send that, so we're going to say, okay, we're going to add that Hallian 7, and that's going to be routed to the drum group. All right, so we play. And we can see that that signal is going out to the drum group. All right, now let's add another instrument track. And I think when we do this, it doesn't look like it's preserving the group. All right, but let's see if I do that in 14, if it behaves the same way. Bear with me, we'll see. All right, so I'm going to add a group channel. All right, so I'm going to send the audio output to the group. All right, let's add another instrument track. And that maintains it there. All right, and I'm going to try back in 15 so that output routing is preserved. I'm going to try it without having an Atmos set up. Okay, so again, we'll add a group track. I'm going to just send it to my stereo out. I'm going to get rid of my 714 bus. Okay, so let's send this to our group. Yeah, so it doesn't look like it's maintaining that. I'll make sure to pass that along. I can see benefits of doing it or benefits of not doing it, where it's not always assuming the same routing. But I'll pass that along for consistency's sake. All right, next question that was sent in. After duplicating an event or part, then nudging to where it needs to be, I've noticed that any other event or part is deleted upon the same track instead of overlapping. Can you please have a look into this as it's slowing down my workflow? Okay. All right, and I'll just switch kind of the colors here. Okay, so I'm going to take this, and so it says when we nudge over that there's no overlap. So I'm going to just nudge this. I'm going to hold down Control or Command plus my right arrow. So we can see that the event is overlapping. So if I continue to go onward, we can see that that particular event is now overlapping, and we could switch between the two different events. So if I wanted that to overlap on top. Now one setting that may change this behavior is if we come over here to our settings and we have editing, look for this particular preference, just delete overlaps if that is enabled. Now as I come over, that would just kind of get rid of and kill all of the overlapped audio. So with delete overlaps, as I just kind of move it over top, then the underlying has no overlaps and the overlaps are deleted. So if I move this particular event and nudge it over top, it would just simply delete the data before and after. So again, just check in your settings or preferences that editing, delete overlaps is not enabled. Okay, let's go back to live questions. All right. So great to see Captain Energy Music on from like Harrisburg, Pennsylvania area. Thanks for joining us. It says Divine Sound Studio. It says, when mastering, is it advisable to master using WAV audio file of MP3 or MP3 audio file, and why? So you will always want to have kind of the fullest resolution representation when you're doing mastering, especially. That's when it's very critical. My friend Michael Romanowski, who's on these live streams a lot, and he's won multiple Grammys for his mastering work, especially regarding immersive projects. And I remember people say, I could watch. Like they don't make Lord of the Rings to look good on your phone. They make the resolution and the attention to detail is so that it looks stunning on a large screen and then translates down. So I would always work with the full resolution audio as opposed to a compressed version of the audio file. Compared to like an uncompressed video file, I would say if hard drives, I remember the days when, a gigabyte, not a terabyte, but a gigabyte had gotten down to $100, where for $100 you could have more than a CD's worth of audio. And that was like a big wow moment in the digital audio community. It's like, wow, it's finally broken that price barrier where you get a gigabyte, a little more than like a 700 megabyte CD for $100. That was like a huge paradigm shift. Now you can get a 8 terabyte drive, 4 terabyte drive, so 40 times that for about the same amount of money. So the space isn't really an issue, with contemporary storage on people's computers. You could buy a 1 terabyte USB flash drive or a external drive, which would hold, lots and lots of CDs worth. So the only reason I would use MP3 is if I needed to attach something in an email to someone for them to hear. But always master at the highest resolution possible, because the different mastering processes don't have to do different interpretation to try to make up information that was taken away in the processing file when we do the compression. So always master with the highest resolution WAV file. So you may deliver a WAV file in different formats. So if you're still doing CDs, which a lot of people are, that's going to be 16-bit 44.1. If you're doing MP3s for delivery and streaming services, if you're doing like HD audio, but a lot of people will say, okay, my master's in 32-bit integer, I'm doing, 192K, and then I will take that, that ultra high resolution file and convert it down rather than trying to, take a low resolution file and add more information into it. So always work with, a standard WAV file. So MP3 will, they sound much better than they used to, but you're still losing some data. And for a negligible difference in file size, the chances of, any artifacts being introduced with that, aren't worth it for the, for the storage considerations. Okay, let me clear my throat real quick. All right. All right, so Yazi and Trabi Music just says, is it possible to change the sample rate BPM when recording my voice with high pitch or other effects to choose a different sample rate? All right, so sample rate and beats per minute don't really have, they're kind of two separate metrics or two separate measurements. So you had sample rate is how many samples per second that the audio is capturing. So a lot of people are working at 48,000 samples per second, is pretty standard. A lot of people are doing 96,000 samples or 192,000 samples per second. Videos are going to be like 30 frames per second, and then you have beats per minute, which is like how fast the song is. If you were to measure 1 minute and you had 80 beats, that would be, and the song was kind of slow. So you would just come over here and say, okay, this is the speed of the metronome or how fast the song goes, if you have to dance fast or slow. So this would be your BPM. So if we're playing, so that would be like 80 beats per minute. We come here, 120 beats per minute is going to be faster. So that's kind of two independent metrics of measuring information that's in our DAW. And if you want to record, so, when you're recording everything in Cubase, you want to have one consistent sample rate. So with Cubase, we can have, multiple bit rate, multiple bit depths within the file. So we could have a 16-bit, a 24-bit, a 20-bit, a 32-bit, a 64-bit floating point file, all within the same project. But everything has to kind of resolve down to the sample level. So we're going to have one sample rate per project. So you could have files that are imported and the sample rate is converted, but it probably doesn't make any sense if you're singing higher in pitch or higher in volume to adjust the sample rate for that one particular passage. So you're going to have one consistent sample rate, because that's kind of like, think of the sample rate as of our project is the Earth's rotation. So that's going to be just a constant thing where the Earth is constantly rotating, and we expect the sun to rise in the east and to set in the west. And, the Earth is constantly moving, but with the sample rate, because it's moving at a constant, the Earth is rotating. And I realize it's technically fluctuating a little bit, but basically the Earth doesn't feel like it's rotating because it's rotating so consistently. So to us, our perspective is that the Earth is kind of standing still, and it doesn't feel like when it turns to night that the Earth is upside down, because that's our perspective. So you think of the sample rate as being constant, and if the sample rate is changing and we have different sample rates, then then it would feel like the Earth is kind of just jerking around, and you would feel upside down. So that's kind of how the program is interpreting and basing its highest level of granular resolution is going to be based on that sample rate. So keep one sample rate and keep, have different bit depths within your particular project. All right. Great to see Daniela on as Da Vinci Girl. Thanks for joining. You see Michael Teams is granted 1 gallon of peanut butter crunch ice cream. And Michael Teams is granted Captenergy Music 1 gallon of amaretto chocolate ice cream. All right, Papa Vol says, hi from work in New York City. Happy to have found a few minutes to join in the stream. I think there's a lot of people watch at work. I won't tell. All right, Papa Vol just says, can you provide some thoughts about how to best gain stage via the mixer and to set the meter, color, and scale to best manage the process? Okay. So, generally, a good way to kind of understanding gain staging, is I always think of, you don't want to kind of have low gain in one area and then have to compensate for it by artificially boosting the gain in another area. So if you record your audio and it's recorded at a very low level of amplitude, let's say it's something along the lines like you look at the amplitude and it kind of looks like this. Is that you're not capturing kind of the optimum signal into your audio stream. Now, some places, some industries will work with very low level amplitude. So if you're doing like radio broadcast, for some reason they work with very low level amplitude because kind of the whole broadcasting scenario is kind of boosting, and they could get in trouble, like in the United States with the Federal Communications Commission, if they are broadcasting too hot. So some radio broadcasts may have low levels. If we're recording this for a typical music track, we would, if this was the recording we got, we would have to artificially boost this through plugins, processing, or just doing kind of gain changes. So ideally, you'd want it to be like minus 12 to minus 6 dB before peaking for the recording. So try to make sure that we are, kind of roughly at a good level. Now, a good way to kind of visualize this, if you want to learn kind of the ins and outs of gain staging, and I'm going to just turn the volume down, is just to take an audio track. All right, so I'm going to come over here. So let's say right now I have everything at 0 dB. I'm going to go to my stereo input 1, and I'm going to place a plugin. So in Cubase, under the tools, you're going to have a plugin called the test generator. So we can say, okay, I want this to be at, let's say, minus 12 dB. All right, so we can see that this is going to generate a sine wave at a 1K test tone at minus 12 dB. So we can see in our input channel, our mixer, if we open this up, we could just say, okay, we're going to make our mixer higher. All right, so we see that our gain here is at minus 12 dB. So I'm going to add a stereo audio track. Okay, and I'm going to set it to stereo in 1. I have my volume down. So now I can see that this track, this signal, is coming directly into this track. And we can see that that's at minus 12. This track, since our fader, we're not attenuating or boosting this particular fader, is at minus 12. And we can see that at this point that this output is also at minus 12. So we have minus 12. We haven't altered the gain. And this way we could see exactly, that we have the same input signal going to output, going into the source, and that source is feeding it directly to the output. And since these are all at 0 dB, all of these will read the same value here, minus 12. Now, if I come over here, let's say, and I adjust this fader down, so let's say I adjust the fader down to minus 6.57, I can see that this track is coming in. So my input signal is coming in, and we have this set to, but we could also make sure that we're looking at our meter settings, and we could say, okay, I want to see this, for input, or we could also right click and show our meter settings, say post fader. So now we could see that as we would adjust that, because I'm attenuating this signal, we can see that this reflects directly here. So any change I make in this particular track, we can see that that will reflect. So my input signal is coming in strong. My channel is attenuated. So we're dropping our volume here, and we see that change reflected right there. Now, if I send this particular track to a group, so if it seems like it's not making sense gain structure wise, you could also send this particular track to a group. And I'm going to come over here and let's say, okay, on our sends for this particular track, this is now going out to group 2. So right now this is at 0 dB, and you could hold down a command or control key and have that go directly to the detente or 0 dB. That this would go down. So if I adjust my group, we can see that the signal is going to be the same here, and a group is attenuating it down, and we see that attenuation reflected in the master channel. If we are sending it to the group, let's say I'm sending this to my stereo out, and I go to my send here, and we go to our destination. So let's say, okay, we're sending it to group 2. Okay, so now I have a send level. My send level is at 0 dB, but if I drop my send down, that as we attenuate, we could have this signal is going to both the channel here, and we're attenuating it in the group, and we can see that reflection. So because this source is going out parallel, so that as we adjust our send level, we're sending less to this, but this is sending it to the group, and it's also sending it directly to our output. So when trying to envision gain structure, use like the test tone oscillator and just kind of figure out, like, as you work and adjust the gain, that way you could see where the gain is changing and where you're not getting kind of optimum signal levels. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, also from Papa Vol says, also, what do I need to know about the relationship between the control room and the main stereo out? I had turned on a control room without any real intent or purpose, and then found out that my audio outputs at the top were disconnected. Why was that? All right, so let's say we have, we'll just throw our oscillator on here. Okay, so we'll go to our tools, to our test generator. Okay, we'll go back to -12. Okay, so when we do this, so when we're working with a lot of different sources, so we can think of the control room as just our monitoring volume. So in many programs, if you're using powered speakers, and I'll just turn this up ever so slightly so we could hear it, people, because it's much easier to grab a software fader than to go to the back of your speaker and to adjust the volume levels. So now when we're doing this, let's say I have my mix and all my mixes are coming through and I have a nice healthy level here. Now what happens if people are using this for their monitoring volume? You can see that, while the signal in the speaker is decreasing as we build our mix, we say, oh, it's getting loud, so I'm going to decrease the monitoring volume. And then as we decrease the monitor volume, we can see that our signal is now, when we get to export a file, this is the signal. So we're going to be losing a lot of gain from this to our source because we're using our master fader as a monitoring volume. So the control room allows us to have a separate monitoring stage. So if I bring this up, we could have a monitoring volume area that's just the monitor volume that doesn't affect the overall gain structure of the mix. So we still can have our healthy mix here. So when we export the file, I could monitor at a lower volume. So and I could change the monitoring volume without affecting the gain structure of the mix. Now, why, when we go to our audio connections, and you can see in my setup, I have my outputs defined, and then I have the actual outputs defined under monitor here for my Yamaha HS7s. So why I do that is because if I define these outputs as well, I'll just turn this down for now. So if I define these outputs, this would be kind of doubly bust, if you will. So I'll say, okay, we're going to come here. So let's say I go to left and to right. All right, so now when I control this and I turn the control room down, I would still hear the signal. So ideally, what you want is for the audio connection, you want that connection for routing purposes, but for it to be not connected. And then your control room, we want this set to be going out so that the monitoring path can be intact. I will restore this to 0 dB. So this way I could monitor without affecting the particular gain structure of the mix. And this is how large format consoles work. So if you have a large Neve or an SSL, you would just basically see All of those particular consoles have a separate monitoring source. Now, the control room also would allow me, if I had multiple pairs of speakers connected, I could switch between 4 different sets of monitors. So if I have like large soffit mounted or on a console or near phone or an Oratone, near field, you could switch between different monitoring sources without having to do any routing in the mix. So we could think of the control room as just a monitoring path so that everything can be monitored without affecting the gain structure of your mix. So I hope that makes sense for you. All right, see, DaVinci Girl says for production I use Absinthe 5. I told Brian that the new GUI is a mess for eye handicapped people like me. Sorry, it's not liking the GUI, Daniela. All right, Papa Volge says, would you use a pre-gain lift in the mixer channel or just adjust the wave part event? All right, so if we have events, so another thing that we can think of when we do kind of gain structure of a mix is, a concept of pre-gain, versus post-gain. So if I have, let's say, this particular signal, all right, let me just switch back to control room. I'll turn this all the way down. All right, so let's say we're playing this particular part here. All right, so if I go to my EQ window here, we could have 48 dB of gain directly here. So we can add a lot of gain here if we wanted to. So that's helpful in a lot. So some people will use pre-gain so that their mix sounds really good at where all the faders are at 0 dB. It's kind of an old school console methodology. So you could do it there. Now, if it's an audio event, you could also adjust your pre-gain volume directly here. So this affects the signal before it hits the channel. So if we switch kind of, our input, how we're looking at the meter, you see our input meter here. If I adjust this, we can see that affects the input meter right there. So both this and this pre-gain will kind of do the same thing, but we can't necessarily do the clip volume, like if it's like a MIDI event or if it's an audio or an effects channel. So that's when, because there's no event to actually adjust the waveform to amplify the waveform, and that's why we kind of give both options so that you have a pre-gain control, so you can use that for effects, for groups, for items that don't have an event that we could actually adjust the gain with. So they're kind of the same thing, 2 different approaches, and the clip gain is only going to be for audio events, not for MIDI, not for instrument tracks, not for effects, not for groups. So that's when you'd use the pre-gain on the channel strip right there. All right, so we see from Michael Teams, says, I notice on stereo tracks that one side is always lower in amplitude than the other. Any thoughts on why this, or is there a way to compensate for this issue? All right, so let's say, again, we'll just do, let's say on our stereo group track here, I'll put that oscillator on. So let's come over here. Try not to blast a 1K test tone into people's speakers. All right. Here, I'll just... Okay, so we see here that we're going to have our okay, so we can see that we have our our gain here is going to be equal. So on stereo tracks, one side is always lower in volume. So as we look at this, we could see that these are going to be identical volume-wise. Now, another thing that could affect this is what we call pan law. So, and the pan law we could set when we come over here to our project setup. We could have different pan law settings. All right, so the basic concept is for your, I believe it's going to default to -3 dB. You could have it be equal power, and the concept is when we do panning that, like if we double a signal, if we take two sources and we double them, that's going to do an increase of 3 dB. So if we have a stereo track versus a mono track, the stereo track may be 3 dB louder just because there's two channels of information versus one channel. All right, now to compensate for this, what we could do is set the pan law. So as we would pan over to like one side, as we do our panning, you may notice that it gets louder when it's going to be in both speakers. Or we could also set this to be equal, so that as we do panning, that we don't have any perceived volume changes as we do like panning on a particular track. So if I switch this particular panner here, so at that point we could, compensate for volume differences. And it doesn't, and so some people will set their pan law so that stuff sounds wider. And what it's actually doing is a little different. While it seems like maybe the sides are getting wider, what's actually happening is the middle actually gets attenuated down. So that when you do panning, that it could be the same level, or if you want it to be, okay, we have 3 dB of volume because we have two channels versus one channel. So two sources would be 3 dB louder. That we could compensate so that as we pan, we don't lose volume, or if we want it to be consistent, or if we want it to actually increase in volume because there are more channels. All right, next question on this. Why is the fader not on the same scale as the meter? All right, so when you look at the meter, so sometimes you want different meters when you're summing multiple sources together. So if we come over here and we set this to, this is the default is +3 dB digital scale. I'm just going to check in the preferences. So you can have it be the same. So let's go to your preferences. And let's say when we go to our metering appearance, so this is our default channel meter is +3 dB digital. But if we wanted to switch to different metering scales, we can look at it directly over here. So we could just say, okay, so now we could have this, and that would be the same from our channel meter to our color meter to our control room meter, or if we wanted to be digital scale. So we could have that, and we could also, if we go to our project setup, we could say, okay, how much volume do we have above 0 dB with the fader? So I could choose for that to be, so you see that we top out here at 0 dB or 6 dB. I could also choose to have that to be 12 dB over 0. So depending on if you're doing like post-production mixing, so you may see some differentiation with that, depending on what the other meter scales, but these can be identical, but you have more options for metering that reflects the summing of all of the individual sources. All right, hope that wasn't too geeky. All right, Constantino Official asks, is there a way to see multi-outputs from VST instruments in the actual range page? I know you can get the faders to come up on the mixer. What's the easiest way to then print them? All right, so I'll just do a new project here quickly. All right, so I'm going to start off with, we'll do a Hallian Sonic here. So Hallian Sonic can have 16 stereo outs. Okay, so let me go ahead. I'm just load up a couple of instruments here. Okay. Okay, so right now we have these instruments that are all these instruments are going to one stereo out. So we come over here. Let me just turn up my control room. Now we're safe and not in the 1K zone. All right, so these are all going to one stereo out. So I come here. Okay. So same stereo out. So now when I come over here, I'm going to go into the instrument and enable my multi outputs. All right, so now when you see me do this, I have, okay, we're just going to master out. I want this going to out 2, that this is automatically added into our mix console. All right, so we have outs 1 through 4. We see these now reflected. So when I come over here and play output 2, output 3, we see this in the mixer, output 4. Now to see this in the project window, we just would come over here and you click on the lower left-hand zone, and then all of the outputs are now visible on the project window. So as I play this, so let's say, okay, now I play the little drum part. You see output 3 and output 2 for this instrument, and output 1. So just go to the main instrument, and then you can come right over there and see all of the outputs on the project window. And now if we had all these files going to multiple channels, we could now, when we render in place, they would be rendered by the separate output. So just click in the lower left-hand corner of the instrument track, and then all of the output channels for that particular instrument will now become visible. All right, so Papa Vol says, your explanation control room makes complete sense to me now. Many, many thanks. I can also see how I would differently configure my headphones to a decent output bus on my Scarlett interface and setup for the levels in control room. Papa Vol says, I wish I had multiple set of speakers. Speakers are, inexpensive now these days. You get great speakers for not too much money. Yeah. And he says Papa Vol is also just saying I can also adjust pre-gain in the mixer strip as well as plugins like EQ. Yeah, and if you go to, there's a plugin, and we added this in Cubase 14 for modulators. So we may not want, so if we come over to, let's say, an insert, if you go to tools, there's also just a dedicated volume plugin as well. So if you wanted to modulate the volume and not affect the channel fader, there is just a dedicated volume plugin as well. But a lot of plugins, you could just get an additional boost of gain as well. So Papa Volge says, I ask as I was setting up a balanced orchestral template using the channel strip pre-gain in order to keep the faders all at 0. So yeah, that's a perfect use for using that. So. All right, so you see Captain Energy Music just thanking Michael Teams for the ice cream. He's working while listening. So John Barry says his controller has a plus 10 dB fader, so it's handy having the 12 dB option. Yeah, so some control surfaces have like plus 12 dB. I think the Euphonics, Euphonic System 5 was like one of the first ones that went up to 12 dB, and a lot of post guys loved it. So it became very ingrained. It's like, oh, I can't mix unless it's plus 12 dB. So that's why we accommodated that for those particular workflows. All right, so we see from Sabretooth Bicycle says, wow, I did not know that. I did not know that, but now I know. Happens all the time here. All right, so we see from Sue says, concerning my vocal workflow with 2 keyboards, how do I set it up in Control Room to capture the sound of the setup you've outlined? I'm not getting sound out of earphones. All right, so you have to figure out, like, I'm not sure if I saw what audio interface you're using. So a lot of audio interfaces will mimic the outputs of, outputs 1 and 2 or the control room out. The main outputs will be mimicked with headphone output 1. So if you have like a 2-in, 2-out interface with a headphone jack, often those will be fixed together. Now, some audio interfaces that have multiple headphone outs, you could say, okay, outputs 1 and 2 are going to headphone 1 and 2, but outputs 5 and 6 are going, let's say outputs 1 and 2 are going out of headphone out 1, but outputs 3 or 4 or outputs 5 and 6, they're going out of headphone output 2. So, and that's going to be a setting, what information or what configuration routing going to the headphone outs is often going to be set in the particular like application, the little software utility, the mixing tool that comes with your audio interface. That's often going to be set there. So if you could let us know which audio interface, but you may have to set the, if you want to have a separate distinct headphone out, you may have to do the routing internally in like the interface mixer applet, if you will. All right, so we see Bratman Studio just says, geek out, Greg. Next we'll cover 20 log. Get your calculators ready, kids. Back at Golden West Recording College. All right. All right. We see Papa Vol is asking if Constantino Official is the same guy who created great videos in Logic Pro. All right. We see Papa Vol just says, but the pre-gain was also in a separate pre-section of the mixer strip. Yeah, so they kind of placed, so the pre-gain will be like, in a separate area of the mixer strip. I think what they wanted to do is to be able to offer it, even though it doesn't necessarily, follow the exact, the exact signal flow with the pre-gain here in the channel strip. They just wanted to include it with the channel strip. Whereas if we go to like our full screen mixer, so let's say if we go to, our full screen mixer here, this would follow the, so if we come over here and we go to set up the sections, Here we can see the routing. So we have the input going into the pre section, going into modulators, into inserts, to EQs, to channel strip, to our Q sends, to direct routing. And this would follow the traditional signal flow order from top to down. All right. But on the channel strip, they just wanted it somewhere that was accessible because a lot of people would miss those particular settings, which are kind of important. All right, Michael Team says he's learning a lot today. Okay, Michael Team says going to need brain food. All right, wonderful to see Tiago checking in from Brazil. All right, so we see from Sue just says, I have the complete audio one. Is this junk? What would you recommend? Thanks. Check out a lot of, just something that has like 2 headphone outs. It's always good to have an ADAT out in case you need to expand. It's that time of year where there's a big industry trade show coming up. Where there will probably be, there's probably a lot of product announcements coming the 3rd week of January for the NAMM show. So if I were buying a piece of gear, you may notice that some companies are having sales, like some big, guitar manufacturers will have sales this time of year because they're going to be rolling out new products in the 3rd week of January at the NAMM show. So if you're thinking of jumping up to another audio interface, I would always wait till see what's announced at NAMM. Just a little like industry tip there. So it's like, oh, I got such a great deal. It's like, oh, I just bought 2 years ago technology when what I really want was the same price, just a month later after Christmas. So. All right, wonderful to see Tiago joining from Brazil. Not sure if I mentioned that. All right, John Barry says, I have a Clarity M hardware meter that connects via VST plugin. I use an unused Q output and inserted there. I can now switch from Q to mix and select channel to meter by switching Q channel. Yeah. All right, so we see Papa Vol has to drop out for a 4 p.m. meeting. Have a good meeting, and thanks for popping in today, saying hi. All right, we'll see if there's other questions that come in. I think we're at the bottom of questions, and we got through our emailed questions. Wait a little bit, see if we have more questions coming in. Thank everyone for all the great questions that people have asked, and if you've learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. Let's just wait another minute or so, see if we have more questions. Thank you everyone for all the great questions. All right, so we see the button man saying evening all, made the end. Hope everyone is safe and has had a great week. All right. Button man says he's been a touch busy, so understand. Thanks for joining us. If you're late, you have to hit the like button immediately. All right, okay, so the button man, okay, so you can save soup, so that must be Michael Pierce. So great to see you on. All right, so you see from Bratman Studio, just says, thank you, Greg. I don't think people really understand the amount of work. All right, so we see from for Yazi and Tribe Music, can Cubase record electronic voice phenomena or phenomena? So I'm not sure if that's I mean, it could record electronic voice, anything that is audio or MIDI can be captured in Cubase or virtual instrument. I'm not sure if that's a particular plugin or not, but obviously people are doing lots of great voice work, including OmniVocal that comes with Cubase 15. I'm still learning, so Button Man is going to be Michael Pierce. And we learned also a couple weeks ago, I found out that if you go to youtube.com/handles, if you want to change your username, for some reason about 2.5 weeks ago, they all changed. All right, so we have a question. What do the white lines mean on the first 8 mixer channels? Okay, so I have a control surface that's connected currently. So let me just add a number of audio tracks. Sorry, I thought I saw that earlier. Sorry if I missed the question. All right, so now when I come over here, we'll see, we just go. All right, so now we see that we have this 8 line, these 8 little white lines. Now I have a control surface that's configured, so I'm going to hit the bank button. So what this is indicating is I have an 8 fader control surface configured. This white line, where when we see it, let me just make all these smaller here. Okay, so now when I hit the bank button, we can see that this white line indicates these are the 8 channels that are being controlled by the control surface. So if I hit the bank button on my Korg Nano control, we'll see this white line jump to the next bank if my control surface is configured for that. Let me just go back to. All right, so let's go to the mix console. So now as I would select, we could see that now I'm going to be in bank 9th. You know, my 8 faders are controlling 9 through 17. If you hit bank again, 17 through 23. So that's just indicating exactly which channels are being controlled by the particular control surface. That's what that means. Okay, so we see Sue just saying, have a great day, Greg. Thanks, Mill. Right. So we see the button man just says, hate this user change thing. So yeah, go to youtube.com/handles and you could change it. So. All right, so we see, thank you, Greg, for the white lines. Mystery is solved. Okay, John Barry just says, are modulators saved with VST preset, or do you need to save a track preset? All right, so let's come over. All right, so let's say I'm controlling on this particular track here, let's say my volume. All right, so I want... We'll go to channel 19. Let's go to modulators. Okay, so I want to control that. All right, so I think if we wanted to save, so we could save like the individual modulator as a preset. So let's say, okay, I want this to be volume December 9th, 2025. Okay. Yep. Sorry about that. But if we had multiple modulators that we wanted to save together on a particular track, then I believe we would just save that as a track preset. So let's say we'll come over here, we'll get retro log. Let's get to the modulators. Okay, so I want the oscillator here. All right, I want to add a different, let's say an attack decay. Okay, so now when I save a track preset, all right, so we have those two parameters going with those two different modulators. We'll save track preset. All right, I'll remove this track. All right, and now let's drag that over, and we can see that our modulators are going and the two parameters are still preserved. So you could save the individual modulator presets, or you could save them with a track preset and be able to recall multiple modulators if you need to within just saving the track preset along with the instrument and all of its settings. And if we had inserts and modulators on inserts as well. So if I want to come here to my amp simulator and let's come over here, you know, we could have the effects and have all of that preserved within the particular track preset as well. You see Jazzy posted the link on changing your YouTube name. So we see Bratman Studio says before you're out early, how's the stream switcher box going, and do you think it would be worthwhile purchase for me? So, yeah, so I think it's definitely, you know, like stream decks are really good, especially if you know, because after a certain, if you're a person that sets up lots of keyboard shortcuts, so a lot of people, you know, like Hans Zimmer was probably the pioneer of taking a, you know, I think it was actually the first kind of touchscreen controller he had was actually a cash register that was kind of modified, you know, to trigger, you know, it was a cash register that would take kind of keyboard shortcuts from a computer keyboard. And that's what he kind of used. And he just needs to hit a button and it always does this. And, you know, this, when I move my finger and I hit right around this part, it always does this function. And if you need to work that way, the stream decks are really good. I think it can speed up your workflow. It could be like a real power user type thing, could really benefit from it. So, you know, find yourself, if you are running out of, if you've made a lot of keyboard shortcuts and you're running out of keyboard shortcuts, stream decks are great for that. All right, so we see Roland stuff. Just says, thanks, Greg. I haven't said anything today, but I've learned a lot, as always. Well, thanks for popping in, saying hello. Appreciate it. All right, we see John Barry just says, cool, nice one. That is powerful. Probably with the modulators, saving those in track presets. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that sneak in. See, Jazzy says he used 39 different Cubase modulators in a single Omnisphere 3 patch to find out its limits. It seems unlimited. That's pretty scary what you could do. So now, like, a patch just not modulating just seems so boring, and so like Cubase 13-esque. So it says maybe Greg knows it's limited to like 99 modulators. I think it's maybe 128. And depends on kind of the combination of modulators. So if we keep adding different sources here, so this one modulator, we could have 8 sources on this one modulator. And I think you could have up to 16 modulators going, and depending on the design of the modulator, some of them could have, so here this one modulator is doing 8 just within this LFO, and you could have this modulator doing other things. So depending on what type of modulator it is, you could kind of keep staggering, keep adding different modulatable sources and make pretty pictures. Let's see, Michael Pierce just says dancing jellies. All right. All right, we'll see if there's any. We'll wait in our minute, see if there's our questions to come in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. I thank everyone for all the great questions. Give it one more minute, and there's usually like a 20 to 30 second delay from when I talk to when you guys hear. Jazz Dude brings up a great point and says, don't forget modulators can modulate modulators as well. So, all right, I'll wait just another 30 seconds, see if there's other questions. You see Capital Razors just says, thanks, Greg. So you're welcome. Thanks for being online and being part of the community. All right, Captain Energy Music says, Greg, will you be going to NAMM? Yeah, I'm not going to be on the main floor. I don't think. I may be floating around, but I'm going to be in the content creator area. So, but if you're going out to NAMM, let me know. Maybe we could get people, if people are on Club Cubase, if you want to meet up somewhere, maybe we could do a get-together, something like that. So if people are going out to NAMM, let me know. Okay, so we see the Buttman. Michael Pierce says he'll be back as this user on Friday. So check out the link the Jazz Dude posted. You could probably get your name back, Michael Pierce. So, but it's interesting that it could kind of recognize people from what they write, even with a different name. So, but thanks for joining us. All right, so it looks like we are done with questions. I want to thank everyone for. So Bratman says yes, NAMM, and we'll get food. So that sounds good. Maybe we could do like a little get together with some of the. There will be a lot of people from Steinberg out, so maybe we could do a little get together and you could meet them, and like some people that I know, like Nuendo product manager, Cubase product manager, or the managing director, Clyde Seneca. And a lot of people will be at NAMM, so maybe we could all get together at NAMM if people are going out. That'd be wonderful to meet new people. I know I've met Rick and Tim at NAMM shows. Got to hang out. All right, Mark Brugler just says, I'm like a sponge. I'm nicely saturated with knowledge. Thanks from Tucson. All right. Okay, looks like we are out of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions and for creating such a wonderful community. I appreciate everyone that joins the live streams. Look forward to, we'll see everyone back on Friday for the next live stream. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. We'll see you back on Friday. Take care. Goodbye.